We're starting this broadcast with West Asia. Palestinian militant group Hamas has said that it is ready to discuss new proposals for a ceasefire in Gaza and the release of hostages and Palestinian prisoners. Senior Hamas official has said that the group has accepted a request from mediators to explore new proposals and is open to discuss any deal or ideas that could lead to a permanent ceasefire, as well as the withdrawal of the occupation from the entire territory and lift the blockade.
The movement's delegation confirmed that the movement is open to any agreement or ideas that end the suffering of our people in Gaza and stop the ceasefire once and for all, and lead to the occupation's withdrawal from the entire Gaza Strip, lifting the siege, providing relief and shelter support to our people, rebuilding and reaching a serious deal for the prisoners.
The decision comes after Gaza's civil defense agency said an Israeli airstrike on a residential block in northern Gaza's Beit Lahia killed nearly 100 people on Tuesday. At least 20 children were among the dead. Now, video footage showed several bodies wrapped in blankets on the ground outside a bombed 4-story building. More bodies and survivors were being retrieved from under the wreckage. The United States called the Israeli strike horrifying. Washington has asked Israel for answers, expressing deep concerns by the loss of civilian life in this specific incident.
This was a horrifying incident with a horrifying result. I can't speak to the total death toll, but there are reports of 24 children killed in this incident. No doubt a number of them are children who have been fleeing the effects of this war for more than a year now. We have reached out to the government of Israel to ask what happened here. We don't yet know the underlying circumstances. We have not gotten a full explanation from them about what happened. But you step back and look at where we are in this campaign.
The State Department also said it is deeply troubled after Israel's parliament passed 2 laws to prevent the UN Agency for Palestinian Refugees, UNRWA, from being able to continue its work. In the United Nations, the United States slammed Israel for not doing enough to help Palestinians in Gaza. U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations Linda Thomas-Greenfield has said that Israel's words must match the actions on the ground.
At the same time, the United States has made clear to Prime Minister Netanyahu that 1 year into this conflict, Israel must address the catastrophic humanitarian crisis in Gaza, that the United States rejects any Israeli efforts to starve Palestinians in Jabalia or anywhere else, and that Israel's words must be matched by action on the ground.
The envoy also reiterated the U.S. threat to withhold arms from Israel and warned Israeli Prime Minister that there is no alternative to a UN aid agency in Gaza. She said Netanyahu must address the catastrophic humanitarian crisis that is playing out in Gaza as we speak. Meanwhile, the IDF announced that 4 Israeli soldiers were killed and an officer was seriously injured during fighting in the northern Gaza Strip on Tuesday. The Israeli Defense Forces said that they all served with the elite multi-domain unit, also called as Ghost Unit. They were killed in fighting in the Jabalia area, which has been the focus of the recent IDF offensive in northern Gaza. In other developments, the Israeli parliament on Tuesday approved a law banning the establishment of consulates in Jerusalem to rather encourage the establishment of foreign embassies in the city, since the countries that do not recognize Jerusalem as Israel's capital often open smaller consulates in the city and base their embassies in Tel Aviv. So far, only 5 countries, including the United States, have their embassies in Jerusalem. And to get us in perspective, we are now being joined by Daniel Rubenstein. He's a current Israeli citizen spokesperson and former advisor to Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Mr. Rubenstein, thank you so much for joining us here on WION.
Thank you for having me.
Let me start with a little bit of optimism that is left in West Asia. The Palestinian militant group Hamas has said that it's ready to discuss a hostage deal as well as a prisoner swap, the people who are being held in Israel. Are you optimistic?
Well, I'm following the news closely, and I would like to be as optimistic as you are that this war can end with the release of the hostages and that Hamas lays down its arms and that it's no longer in a position to take more hostages in the future. The reason that Hamas took hostages was twofold. One, it wants to demand the release of Palestinian terrorists from Israeli jails, but it also wants the hostages as insurance, meaning any deal that Hamas was going to accept would be a deal that guarantees that Hamas remains in power in Gaza and can prepare more massacres like it carried out on October 7th. So that's why the negotiations haven't led to a conclusion in the past year. There may be a change now, which is that much of Hamas's senior leadership has been killed. Israel has eliminated them on the battlefield. So the big question right now is, one, who exactly is negotiating for Hamas? Are they going to be a little bit more willing to compromise than the previous leadership? And also, where are the hostages? How many of them are alive? There's a lot of big questions. And right now, the Israeli negotiators are testing the waters with the Qataris, with the Egyptians, to find out exactly what is possible. And I would like to be optimistic that we will get somewhere this time.
All right, since you yourself claim that most of the leadership of Hamas, as well as Hezbollah, as you also must be knowing, has been eliminated, why do we see that the IDF's purpose hasn't changed in Gaza?
Yes, while Hamas's leadership has been severely damaged, Hamas continues to fight. There are many Hamas fighters in Gaza that continue to wage war against the people of Israel. They are continuing to fight, and Israeli soldiers are continuing to die fighting them. This is urban warfare in densely populated areas. This is where Hamas has chosen to fight from. And it's safe to assume that many of the hostages are also held in these densely populated urban areas, which makes the warfare ongoing and continuous until these Hamas fighters in Gaza lay down their arms and release the hostages. Now, Israel has made a promise, an offer. The Israeli Prime Minister offered Hamas amnesty. Any Hamas terrorists who are holding Israeli hostages right now can escape with their lives if they release the hostages. I would love to see if anywhere abroad they can leave the area with their lives. Perhaps Qatar will be willing to take them, perhaps Turkey, but they can leave, they can remain alive. We just want the hostages to come home.
All right, Mr. Rubinstein, I think you'll agree when I make this assessment that one is recruiting future extremists if one keeps killing innocent people. There were 24 children in the recent Israeli attack on Gaza that we just reported on. Do you really think this war against Hamas, as IDF claims, is going to make Israel safer?
Well, I would like to emphasize the level of extremism that we saw on October 7th. Thousands of Hamas terrorists invaded Israel, massacred 1,200 people, and they were joined by thousands more civilians from Gaza who came in. They were cheered in the streets. The level of extremism was extremely high, and the level of support in Palestinian society for the October 7th massacre was extremely high. So Israel is in a very difficult situation where Hamas continues to fight, continues to call for the destruction of Israel, and continues to hold hostages. So from Israel's perspective, this war cannot end with Hamas still in power and with the hostages still in Hamas terror dungeons. So what that leaves us with is that Israel is going to continue to fight for its life, not just in Gaza. We're talking about an area that's a few football fields away from homes in Israel. This is not a faraway war. We're not just dealing with Gaza, we're dealing with the Iranian regime and its proxies on 7 different fronts: Lebanon, the Houthis in Yemen, Gaza, the West Bank, Syria, Iraq, and the Iranian regime itself. We are in a 7-front war for a year.
The axis of resistance, as it's often called. Mr. Rubinstein, it's called the axis of resistance, as it's called. And one would like to believe Israel wasn't naive when it attacked. Rather, as you rightly pointed out, 8th October was a massacre, and Israel was responding to it when it started a war against Hamas. There is a fair assessment that what happened on 8th of October was extremely wrong. But what I'm saying is that one cannot imagine that Israel was naive to think that once it attacks Hamas, the other axis of resistance, as it's called, is not going to get involved.
Yes, they call themselves the axis of resistance, and the big question is, what are they resisting? What is their purpose? The Iranian regime is pretty clear that its purpose is the destruction of Israel, and it supports the groups surrounding Israel that want to destroy Israel. So Iran has provided these groups with missiles, rockets, anti-tank missiles, suicide drones, and so on, that it has ordered these groups to fire at Israel. So Israel is going to respond to these attacks until they're no longer in a position to attack Israel. It's quite simple.
All right, Mr. Rubinstein, we are not hearing so much about what happens post-war in Gaza. But I'll have to leave it with that. Thank you so much for joining us, Young WION, and getting us.
Thank you for having me.